My name is Gary Carner. Welcome to the Pepper Adams Roundtable number six, the sixth in a series that we've done here. And I'll be the moderator today. We've got some exciting people that are going to talk about predominantly about Pepper's compositions, although we'll go in all sorts of different directions. Um, with me, as always, is my trusty sidekick, Aaron Lington, who does all the technical stuff and editing, which has been fantastic. If you can see the previous five of these at pepperadams.com. So we're going to start. Sandy Adams had a previous, and something came up with her schedule. That's Pepper's cousin, so she's not going to be attending today. So we'll start with Ron. Ron asked me to ask him a bunch of questions. He didn't want to per se pair anything, which is fine. But the nice thing about Ron is that he's almost a family member of Pepper's because Pepper was a close friend of his dad's, John Marabuto, the pianist, who they met at a recording session right after, well, actually, when Kenton was in the Bay Area playing the Macumba Club for a long engagement, and producer Pat Henry for San Francisco Jazz recorded Mel Lewis's first date as leader. Pepper was on it. Bill Perkins was supposed to be on it, but he got beat up outside of the club, and Jerry Coker took his place. And so that's when Pepper and John met. And then I'm pretty sure it was the following year, it might have been the year after that, that Doug Watkins was on tour with Pepper and he got thrown out of a hotel due to his race. And Pepper in protest left, and they ended up staying at your dad's place. Now, I assume that
I
was,
didn't know that.
yeah, that's 57 or 58. You would have been, what, 3 years old or something? 4 years old?
6.
6 years old. So, when did you first become aware of Pepper coming to your house? What are some of your earliest remembrances of that?
Well, uh, like you said, the Mel Lewis record is where they met. My dad came home kind of raving about this guy, and they really hit it off. They really became friends real fast. Um, so from then on, when he would be in town, he'd kind of stay with us, I guess. And so he was going through with, let me think, uh, um,
Donald Byrd?
Lionel Hampton, but I don't think he played with Donald Byrd. I remember Donald Byrd has all those record covers with the Jaguars on them, and I saw some of those. So they had a quintet together.
So your dad was raving about this guy, the saxophonist at the session, and you just were aware of Pepper generally.
Yeah, I don't think I met him that time. I
Okay.
may have, or he may have come over, but that's when they first met. And then that's when I remember my dad talking about him.
So as a young drummer and possibly pianist in your dad's image as well, did you go out and hear Pepper play as he would continue to visit over the years? Did you go hear him in local clubs?
Um, I was too young to see him with Donald Byrd. Um, I don't think I saw. Let me think.
Yeah, the
What are
Bird
they?
Band broke up in 61, so you would have been like what, 11 or so?
10. Yeah.
At 10. And you were playing at that time?
No,
Okay.
no, I wasn't. I was playing baseball.
Me too. Um, so when did you ever see him perform before you were a professional player? Did you ever see him perform on the West Coast?
I'm trying to think. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think they would play around the house. He and my dad would just hook up for all afternoon and play and talk. And
There's one story about well, your dad and Jerry Dodgen, before Dodgen moved to the East Coast, had a rehearsal band. They would rehearse like I think on Wednesdays and a few times during the week. And there's a story about Pepper being in the house and hearing the band play, and he woke up and he came walking down the steps in his pajamas, playing whatever Pennies from Heaven or something, and Dodgen tells a story about what is that? He said he just
Yeah.
couldn't believe what he was hearing. Was that a story that Dodgen told you, or that
No, I saw that.
you saw that?
Mm-hmm.
So you were down watching the rehearsal?
Is a little house.
Okay,
Yeah,
can't miss it.
I'd always check them out.
Yeah,
I don't know how big that band was. It might have just been four.
Dottie Dodgen
Yeah.
on drums.
Uh-huh. Uh, anyway, I don't know if they were just sessioning or rehearsing, but I do remember Pepper coming down the hall. Um, like you said, pajamas
Right, right.
and his horn and his horn.
And his horn
Yeah.
roaring away. That must must have been amusing. But did his playing make an impression upon you as a young player or as a young baseball player?
It was just kind of normal behavior in our house.
Yeah.
People were there playing a lot and, a lot of characters.
Okay. So you graduated from UC Berkeley, I think in '75. There were in Pepper's materials, there was actually an invitation to attend the graduation that he got. I don't know if you're aware of that. That's how I know about that. Was it '75?
That would either be 73 or 74.
Okay. And then wasn't that much longer or after that that you actually moved to New York and as a drummer and started working with him, that he kind of took you on as under his wing, right?
I don't know about the under the wing. I know I did a couple gigs with them out here, uh, which I think you have at the Bach Dancing and Dynamite and a
With
few
your
other
dad,
places.
with your dad and Mraz, right?
That was the first one. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the first one at Bach. I think you have the second one up too with Frank Foster, and I haven't heard that.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, that's over at William Patterson. That's the septet, I think, with Cecil Bridgewater and Mraz I, and
Well,
you
that
and your
wouldn't have been
dad.
me. Yeah,
Yeah, that
that
was
wouldn't have been me.
wouldn't have been you.
No.
Okay, that might have been earlier.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a local rhythm section because it was my father and I, and then hopefully Mraz, but I think a couple guys around here.
yeah, yeah. But
So my mom would book these gigs. She wanted to put them to work, and
on the West Coast. Yeah, she was
yeah,
basically an East Coast booking agent, right?
no, all local.
Local, Bay Area exclusively.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I
She would
interviewed
get him something. She would get him something on the day off or something, or get him to stay an extra day.
to a clinic or the Richmond High School or
Yeah, yeah, we did
Quamba
do that.
Club or something.
Yeah, uh-huh. That's
So
right.
you said some amazing things to me when I interviewed years back about Pepper going out as a single because he had left that Mel's band in '77.
Hmm.
Say that your move to New York, your move east, pretty much corresponded with him going out on his own. In fact, one of his earliest gigs after he left that mill was doing something in the Bay Area, which I assume your mom was involved with.
Yeah,
But
I guess.
but you said that you watched him grow. You said that he
Oh,
was
it's a
built
band later. Yeah.
as a band leader, as a composer, as somebody who was able to better arrange his sets and time his sets. And you talked very interestingly about those tempos, those unusual tempos that he chose, right? Well, maybe you can tell that story.
Well, Pepper would call these tempos that were like in between the cracks. Uh, uh, and and they were hard.
Yeah.
And I just did my best to stay in there.
I
And
have to
I guess
chime in and just say I know about those tempos in between the cracks.
okay, okay, good. Yeah, you get it.
So it's Ronnie Burrage, for those of you who don't know. We
Yeah,
got two
it's in
guitarists
there.
here today.
Hey, Ronnie, nice to meet you.
So you said they were like what a square band would play, like a polka tempo or something?
No, sort of. I found out later they were kind of foxtrot
Yeah,
tempos.
yeah.
Does that make sense, Ronnie?
Absolutely. But he also did some weird things where he called it like a regular slow tempo for somebody else would be super slow for Pepper. And then if he called something super fast, if he played clarinet, it's ridiculous. But he had a his tempos were always different from anybody else I played with. That's all I can
Yeah.
say.
Well, good. You too.
So
Yeah, they are different. So it was a challenge holding them together.
yeah,
And
you gave me one story, told me one story about the band was rejecting it, and you started like the bass player wasn't keeping that tempo, and you started sliding, and he came over and whispered your ear, "Hey, it's I pay you to play those tempos, right?"
he played with some great players, some big heroes of mine. And yeah, I would start to slide toward them, and he let me know. That I mean, yeah. You see, that's why you're here, so because you can play that tempo.
How many gigs would you say you played with him once you moved to New York?
Like 50?
Wow, that many? But you don't have any
Yeah, a lot.
recordings, right?
A lot.
Yeah. And all clustered around 78, 79, 80 or so, would you say?
Um, Geez, I heard something from it was either 78 or maybe even 77
Okay.
into 77, but certainly in 78. And that was uh got this neighborhood club, Three Sisters in West Patterson, New
Yeah.
Jersey,
Yeah.
and then down the street at
Colors.
Gulliver's,
Colors.
yeah, which
Yeah.
was a great club.
Fantastic. That's where I grew up actually listening to jazz because I lived about a half an hour from there. I went there all the time. Um, yeah. So there's a bunch of recordings of you with Pepper at William Patterson now because they have all my archives, all the stuff that I collected,
Damn,
all Pepper's cassettes.
hot
So
damn.
if you ever get to New York, check that out. It's moved. It used to be in the separate building. They moved everything into the library just recently. So talk a little bit about his influence on you, if there was any, and talk about his tunes too, since that's the focus here today.
Okay. Um, well, his time was actually really good, and I'm pretty good at listening to other people's time. So I always had some sort of reference, you know, of where he wanted it. And he messed with the tempos a lot. And but every once in a while, he would hit the regular time just enough where I knew where it was. Uh, but it wasn't easy because he was messing with the time so much. Um, so I learned that, how to listen. Um, from there, he really didn't say much. If I tried to be like someone else, he'd hit me on that. And hopefully I just got better playing with those guys. I was just kind of thrown in there, so I was a mess.
What do you mean he hits you when you try to be someone else? Like you're trying to play in someone else's style or copy something off a record? Is that what you're talking about?
Uh, let's see. Some
Cliche?
drummers I had heard, some drummers I had heard in town that I really liked, and generally they played on top of the beat more than I did. So I tried to push it up there, and he let me know. uh, it's kind of that thing. If I wanted to play with such and such, I would have called such and such.
So did you find he's pulling? You told me he pulled the time back a lot,
Yeah,
which
he
was
did.
hard. And Gene Perla told me that Pepper had an elastic time feel. He can go. He was sort of swimming forward, back. Oh, to quote you, always fucking with the time.
Did I say that?
You did say that.
That's the technical term.
Yes.
I'll go with this playing behind. Let's stay with
Yeah.
that.
Did you enjoy his tunes? Were there any favorites? Anything you like to play particularly? You were playing with him when he was just really starting to compose about half his book. So, um, stuff
Yeah, you
from,
know what? I was going to say that. So the book was he had this uh, um, shopping bag from a record store in I think Copenhagen, and that's where the and that was his library. In that it was the big yellow bag.
that Dobles?
Was that it?
No, I think he had several bags. I think I know what you mean, actually. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I always remember this yellow, shopping bag from Copenhagen, and so that kind of got bigger. Uh, so when I started, it was standards and Thad Jones tunes, and he would add something. Uh, every gig he would like add something of his own until it was half or more of his own tunes. But there was always a lot of Thad Jones going on, and then he would add tunes as we went along.
Cool. Anything you want to say in conclusion? I'm sure you miss him.
Yeah, I do. I do. Uh, what is it? I learned so much, and there was this trust there somehow, because he would just call me. I mean, we were friends too. Um, I'm curious if I'm one of the last people to see him alive, because I was over his house 1 or 2 days before.
I think you and Tommy were the last two people to see him.
Hmm. Wow.
And you spoke very poignantly about that, which is in one of my books, maybe both actually, about you holding his
Hmm.
hand. And it was like a few days before he passed away. Tommy and his wife Diana were also there. I think
Hmm.
2 days before he passed away. He was resigned to dying, and he was very and rolling
Yeah.
out of it, he was very resentful too. He talked. He was putting down Mulligan and had some pretty pointed things to say.
Um, I didn't see much of that.
Yeah, might have
Um,
been too weak
but
for that.
um, but I'd see him, get out front with that stuff just every once in a while. So I didn't know much about the his relationship with Jerry Mulligan, except that it was bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And when Jerry Mulligan showed up to his memorial,
Yeah, people were angry about that,
I
actually.
was angry.
Could you go into that a little more? I don't know anything about this. I just wonder, what was there an original antagonism between the two of them, or what what caused that rift?
Well,
Dan
they were very
Morgenstern. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry.
well. First of all, they were very different players. You know, uh,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
so
But
so
but I
there's
thought they would
that,
have mutual
and then
respect.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I just thought they would have mutual respect given their,
You
lineage.
know what? You know what? I was gonna say don't quote me, but I don't think so.
Well, Pepper thought he was a hack.
Well, I mean, Pepper was a real bebop player, and Jerry Mulligan wasn't.
Yeah,
And Pepper used the whole horn. I think you pointed this out. Y- y- Pepper had
Ron,
a way different sound, and he just played more, but a very different sound, very different time. One thing was I think Jerry Mulligan, uh, um, messed with him when he got to New York. I don't know if he was dissing him or what, but uh, he kept him out of some scenes or something. It was very not helpful.
Yeah. And yet I spoke with, I interviewed Percy Heath and he said Pepper was a phenomenon. He was as soon as he came on in the New York scene, musicians were flipping out over how much better he played the Mulligan. This is Percy Heath speaking. And that's also, of course, his opinion. But so
No, I
they,
would agree with that.
oh, of course, but that's
I'd like
beside the
to,
point. Yeah. No, but
like to,
the
Hey,
musicians knew who he was.
Gary,
Yeah.
I actually have the exact quote from your Cadence Magazine interviews, or this might have been, was it Cadence Magazine? Let me see here. Yeah, that this Pepper was quoted as saying, quote, "The fact that Mulligan is the famous baritone saxophone player and I'm playing baritone saxophone, yet I don't sound a bit like him. People would take this as being that I can't play very good. Because if I was any good, I'd play like this fella who everybody says is great. And I enjoy what Jerry plays, and he plays it very well, but that's not the way I want to play at all. I've got a whole different thing I want to do. We've got two levels of appreciation here. Critics like who they like, and then musicians like who they like. Sometimes there's a wide differentiation."
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that in all the Pepper Adams interviews and that I've listened to and read, that he's been asked about Jerry Mulligan like most of the time, and I've never found a comment from Jerry Mulligan publicly about Pepper Adams. Never once. No one ever brought it up. And I wonder if he was avoiding those kinds of questions or if people were not thinking of it. I mean, was Pepper really that underground? I don't,
Well, it
I
was
don't
more
understand.
I think it was more like what Jerry Mulligan was married to movie stars and he really got over and he had that image. And Pepper was very much the opposite of that.
Yeah, I just have to
You know,
chime in right quick. I think I remember Pepper saying, I mean, there was some bitterness because of the success that Jerry had, and they were two totally different players. Pepper was very adventurous, yeah, he was a bebopper, but he played all of the horn and he went for everything that he heard. I think that was a difference.
I
I
would
think it was
agree.
bitterness.
Yeah, resentment. Yeah, that he wasn't that he was so talented. He knew he was talented, but he just didn't get the record contracts that he deserved. Always recording for very, very small labels with minimal, scanty distribution. It certainly wasn't befitting his talent. So I totally agree with you, Ronnie. And when I interviewed Dan Morgenstern, he said, "Oh yeah, Mulligan didn't really like too much competition. He didn't appreciate people around who could also play. So he would bristle about it." Um, any other comments
Well, yeah,
for
he pretty much blackballed him
really?
from what I could tell and what I've heard and what Pepper
Yeah,
would say.
really?
Yeah, well, he was threatened. Wouldn't you be? I think he felt threatened.
So, in other words, Mulligan, you think from what you've heard, Mulligan just closed them out of certain job opportunities or spoke poorly about them? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think he ever recommended him for anything. I don't think
Yeah.
he helped him along.
Yeah.
But I think
I'm
I
sorry.
think he was threatened because
Yeah.
Pepper played so much better than he did,
Yeah. Roland Hanna said Mulligan was a line player. Pepper played changes. It's a whole totally different approach.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, different sound, different parts of the horn,
yeah,
everything.
everything. All right. Any last questions for Ronnie? And who's next? Is it Bevan?
I'd like to just ask
Yeah,
really
sure.
quickly,
Of
since
course.
I've heard that Pepper had a very clear way of directing and counting tunes off and things and explaining what needed to happen, making it very easy. But I've always kind of wanted to know a little bit more detail about how that worked for myself. really. You know, how did he, if it was a standard you didn't know, or did he just tell you 32 bars, swing, here's the tempo? Or was it, how did that work exactly? If it was an original, you know, how did he explain things?
Let's see. He would say, so here's some hits you have to do. You know, things are written. You had drum parts and stuff, but they were really loose, and there would be kind of a minimum of, say, hits or breaks, stuff like that, with fab tunes too. And yeah, he would just point that out. You know, just something like that. I mean, everyone did what they wanted, but on those certain tunes, like I said, he had little arrangements. They weren't much, and certain things he wanted, but not a lot. He was playing with such good players; they got it. And a lot of the stuff I did was with Detroit piano players, so they just read each other's minds. You know.
So you
That's
worked with
cool.
you worked with Roland, you worked with Tommy, you worked with Barry.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was a quick education for you.
Oh God.
Who of those pianists,
You know,
who was your favorite to play with? Who had the most interesting way of interacting with you?
um, I would say that they were all just different, you know, because they're all great. And depending what they were doing. As far as easy or hard, but I was just so intimidated by Tommy that I didn't know what to do. You know, he's a subtle player, and he didn't play loud, and you know, and I was a mess. uh, Roland was easy, uh, um, uh, 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 and Barry was easy.
Well, if it's
Tommy
any
was just so good
consolation,
and so understated, you know, is
yeah. Well, he was that way in person too.
yeah, exactly.
I was a mess when I
Yeah,
first
he
met him.
was.
I was a babbling idiot. I was so intimidated due to his legacy.
Are you talking about Tommy?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
when I first met Tommy, yeah.
thought you meant
I
Barry.
just,
Yeah.
not yeah. I did have lunch with Barry one time. But this was after his stroke. He didn't really remember that much. Um, Roland, I interviewed at great length, and all that stuff's at the archive at William Patterson. All right, Ron, any last thoughts before we move on to Bevan?
Um, oh, I did want to say one thing, and this is my dad again. So, but he played with such good piano players, you know, and I call my father and I go, man, guess who I played with last night? And he was like really knocked out. So that was a nice moment, you know, and you know, I had the job of driving these guys around sometimes. Uh, so talk about awkward, you know, before we had played. But I did get to see the Baroness's house a lot.
Mm-hmm. In Jersey, in Weehawken.
We
I went there with Barry. That was pretty incredible. Just to see that scene. They said they had some incredible parties there.
oh, that was across the street from the park where what is it?
Burrage out Hamilton.
Alexander
Yeah.
Hamilton got shot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. The dueling place.
Yeah.
Didn't Pepper live in the apartment where he died in the Village,
Oh no, he was
where
in
Alexander
Brooklyn.
Hamilton died?
Next door. Next door.
Next
For
door.
real.
Yeah. Yeah, on Jane Street. Yeah,
On
there's
I
a
went and
Jane?
saw that
plaque
apartment.
there. We try to get a plaque at Pepper's place, but we didn't get very far on that. All right, Bevan, you ready? You might be
Uh,
muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, Aaron, if you want to put up, I don't know how you want to do this, but if you want to put up the first PDF, Filson, and
One moment, I'll get it up.
What a cool tune.
while Aaron's doing that, and thanks, Aaron, for getting all that stuff. Um, while you're doing that, I just want to say I'm going to concentrate on just a couple of things because you know, as you all know, Pepper has a huge catalog of original stuff, and his writing is often deceptively simple. But there are two things that this tune particularly shows that I think are really consequential in terms of the big picture of writing and good lessons for young writers, who need a bunch of lessons, but don't let me get on that soapbox yet. Anyway, Filson is this tune from the late 50s, as far as I can tell. It's actually rather, in terms of length, not particularly consequential, but there's some things in it that I thought are really important. And I don't know what happened at the recording session, but I have a feeling that some things got left out. And I'm just going to try to explain that in terms of what I'm hearing. First of all, as we probably all know, you know, Pepper was a very astute songwriter, and two things he did that I think are, you know, infinitely important for today's writers. One is, well, there's more than that, but these particular things, I call them deception and contribution. Deception is just where you think you're going somewhere and you think you know what's going on with the form of the tune, but there's just a little adjustment that the composer makes that throws you off. And so when the inevitable does come in, it's very satisfying because previously you're not sure you're going to hear that. And this, again, this may have to do with the recording session, but it's a really time-honored technique, and it's not used that often, as much as I would like these days. It's a very subtle thing, and any great composer will do it. Ellington comes to mind, Beethoven for that matter, or Stravinsky. Here in this little tune, when you listen to the recording, if you've never heard the tune before, you may not be sure what's going on, because there's a chorus of rhythm section out front, and Tommy Flanagan plays beautifully, but to me he's a little tentative, as though maybe he wanted to figure out some things, or maybe Pepper instructed him to be really sparse. But at any rate, you might not be sure of what's going on until the form is just about through, and then you realize, you know, it's just a regular blues form. On the last two bars of that opening chorus, I thought it was very significant. It's notated here as best as I could, but Louis Hayes plays these triplet figures, rimshot figures. And again, I would have to be at the recording session, but I can't believe that Pepper didn't ask for this, because triplets are very important later on in the tune, as well as a shuffle feel. And by setting this up, Louis contributes to this form. He gives us a hint of what's going to happen before it even happens. It's just it's a standard kind of setup drummers do, but it's really well done, and it leads you into the little deceptive area that I'm talking about, so that immediately you feel that, okay, you know where you are, He's set it up. Now we're coming back to the head, but the head is nothing like what you'd expect. And here's why. It's very sparse. It's just a couple of notes. And I kind of have to wonder whether it inspired that way Freddie Freeloader, the melodic structure of it. I can't prove that, but there's some hint of it here in terms of just a little setup, not just in terms of the notes. The notes are not the same, of course, but the general sort of setup and the blues form just has that same kind of relaxed feeling and sparseness as Freddie Freeloader. At any rate, the deceptive thing, aside from the fact that, again, with that opening chorus, you're not 100% sure what's going on until maybe halfway through. But then, as the head gets played, which is Donald Byrd and Pepper playing together in a harmony, I just notated the melody notes. You know, it starts out, it feels like there's a blues thing going on, but the harmonic rhythm is just not indicative of that at all, necessarily. Or it's a little vague, and it's deceptive. To me, it's done on purpose, and it really throws you off, and you really don't know what's going to happen next. When you get to the sixth bar of the tune, the E flat 7 sharp 11, there finally you get a typical hard bop melodic figure that starts to creep in. But until that point, there's a little bit of question as to what's going on. And I don't think it's any coincidence that at that point, where you do know what's going on, at least for me, the shuffle feel comes back in. You know, Lewis really lays it down then. Whereas in the previous chorus, the last two bars that I notated, it's just sort of a setup, it's anticipated, but you don't know whether it's going to be a shuffle or not. And then suddenly you realize, well, the triplets are here to stay. And lo and behold, you also have a couple of triplets in the melodic line there, the F minor, G minor 7 bar, and the next bar. And it's, you know, it's sort of your basic hard bop thing, but just very well done. And it feels like you're really settling in. You're really, really settling in. And then the ending is perhaps a little more conventional, but it sort of sets up everything to start all over again, because you feel like, well, now we're in really hard bop land. But then, of course, the melody repeats, and there's that deceptive thing of the first 5 bars that comes through again. The other part of this is that it's very low key. It's a very low key recording, very relaxed, and yet those hits that Lewis plays at the beginning of the tune are very definitive, and I get the feeling that Pepper had him do that. Pepper told him to do that, to set things up that way, or maybe even gave him those particular rhythms, because they're so relaxed and deliberate. It feels inevitable to me. The other thing that makes me feel that way is that right after the head is played twice, Pepper embarks, he quotes a rhythm from the tune right away in the beginning of his solo. And his solo, to me, is one of his, I mean, he's had so many great solos, as we know, but to me, this is one of the standouts, not just for its relaxation, but its expressiveness, which is in direct contrast to the sort of almost, for me, a tongue-in-cheek kind of feeling that you get on the head, like they're really holding back. The writing is really holding back. Yes, there are these hard bop, melodic, little motivic things happening, but it feels almost like we're in the world of cool. And then Pepper embarks on this very relaxed solo, but it's extremely expressive at the same time. And he also uses a lot of space, which suggests to me that he's taking his cue. He's listening to his inner composer, and he's taking his cue from the mood of the tune itself. So again, while it's just a 12-bar blues essentially, it has a lot of consequential compositional tightness to me, even bearing into the solo. I would also say that Kenny Burrell's solo and Paul Chambers' solo also are really great and kind of launch into that same feeling. And I was surprised. I don't know. There's another thing here. I feel the relaxation in the tune, and I don't know what happened during the session, but I have a feeling there were some indicated dynamics within the head of the tune. I'm not sure where they'd be, but I have a feeling that it would go from soft to loud.
Yeah, that's the record. Sorry to interrupt. That's the record that Pepper was really upset about because the engineer decided to get rid of all the dynamics.
Ah,
Yeah, and he was so aggravated with that.
I can imagine because it feels like something was going to happen with that, and there could have been several ways to do it, and it didn't happen. It's just everything's very even sonically. I mean, in terms of dynamics, and I kind of wondered about that, like what happened. Is that what he really wanted? So that's really interesting to know that it was the engineer who, sound people. Well, it's a pet peeve of mine. They just, as we all know, they can drive you nuts.
Pepper too.
They hear you playing softer and they turn it up because they think they're losing you when in fact it's a part of the musical.
That's what Pepper was so upset about. He goes, "Yeah, we play loud, we play soft. I can fix that." Yeah. Would it help to play this head?
Yeah, I gave Aaron the link to the recording with
Maybe we can listen to the theme and then you can get back to it and point out a few things.
I'd just be curious if anybody could predict where those dynamics might be, because they would be really delicious.
There was one tune he said it was supposed to be really mysterioso. They had really dramatic crescendos, and the engineer just took them all out. He was so upset. This is the Bethlehem date.
So you'll hear this first chorus is
Yeah, that's it.
Tommy plays beautifully, but he's just a little tentative, and you can. It's almost like, well, does he want to be Ahmed Jamal or not? You don't really know. But when Lewis comes in with those rim shots, all of a sudden I feel we are in compositional land. So check that out. It's simple, but it really works.
Okay, here it comes. And then how much of this do you want me to play, Bevan?
You could just start from the beginning and just go to the beginning of. I just would love everybody to hear Pepper's initial. He's the first solo, so I'd love everybody to hear his first line, and then you can cut it.
Sounds good. Here it comes. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. And you notice how Pepper, not only does he sort of, he takes a motive from the tune and, puts a blue note in there, and but all through that solo, he references those triplets in a very relaxed way. So he's still hearing the tune, and it's very cohesive. But I think, yeah, I'm just curious if anybody could predict in retrospect where those dynamic changes might be. Just curious what people, I have my own idea, but I wonder if anybody.
I've thought about it a lot. It seems like they're decrescendoing into that last two bars of the form, really getting down. But also those initial bars of the head definitely seem like it's very strange intervals. And it seems like that would be a spot to bring it down quite a bit and then pop into the shuffle feel.
Yeah,
That's what I've always thought.
yeah, it feels like it. I'm talking about, like know exactly what you're saying. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars of the form, it seems like it's like a sforzando that they trail off into nothing. Something like that is what it seems to me. What it seems like it should be.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, but you don't really hear it, like you say. They were removed or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to hear through a potential gain knob getting pulled down, but you can sometimes kind of tell based on it. It is very hard to tell, though. You can kind of tell where things sound boosted, but
I think this is, very indicative of a lot of his writing in that, again, the line between the contribution aspect of it, whether Louis Hayes did that in response to the style and the writing, or whether Pepper asked him to do certain things. I think it's very indicative of his writing that he leaves room for that. But one of the reasons, I'll go more into this in the next tune, but one of the reasons he has that kind of room is because, this is, just essentially the standard blues thing, except for that deceptive beginning. But his harmonic structures are very, sometimes parts of them can be conventional, but they have an inner tensile strength that makes the soloists all feel really comfortable and really feel like they can go in a lot of different directions. And it rivals, they're all like miniature symphonies to me. They have such tensile form, strength of form. Anyway, any other comments on this one? We could go on to the next one. This is Aaron, this is the Witch's Pit.
Just a moment and I'll pull it up. Just gotta find it. Here it is.
Now this one got me on my soapbox, I have to say, because, and I'm going to take the liberty after this of referencing a tune of mine, because this reminded me of that. But to show you the concept, like I said, his harmonic structures are always very strong, and they're very oriented around a really strong tonal bass. They don't go wandering off into the atmosphere that much, but when they do, it's really a beautiful surprise, and it's also there's also a sense of inevitability. I find that to be very often missing these days with a lot of stuff, and it relates to a lot of things. My feeling with Pepper is that he had a lot of respect for a lot of things, the Great American Songbook, and at the same time, the alterations that hard bop writers, made to the bebop forms, making them, shall we say, melodically a little more palatable, perhaps, or a little more direct to audiences at the time. But he never compromised. And it's in this particular tune, which I thought was very interesting, his harmonic direction, as usual, is impeccable. He has a sense of enough variety to create interest where it's needed, but he also has a strong sense of tonality. The beginning of this tune utilizes the 4 chord the same way a lot of, some standard tunes do. It's just in the introduction, but he brings it back later. I'll show you just in terms of C major relating to E minor. And so right away, there's this feeling of suspense at the beginning. He's not starting on the tonic. And then when he goes to the, that's what I meant by deceptive there in this the first bar after the pickup. And you notice the pickup is just an outline of part of the C major, but it could be E minor as well. And he goes to the fifth bar, where I say leading. It would have been very, very easy for him to go to G major there. So a lot of things more basic, but he doesn't. And even though B minor 7 is not that far away, going to the E7 flat 9, and then the next bar, it's a lot more interesting than either G major. He could have done A minor also, but that would have felt false to me. He just had the right, he picked the right thing to do, is what I'm trying to say. In terms of creating some harmonic direction, he's just trying to get to the end of 4 of the next bar, and he does it really well. Now, also at the same time, there's this compositional element of this little secondary motive, I call it letter B, that happens in that 6th bar. It's just an upward motion diatonically, but it's going to come back. And that's what's so interesting about it. It becomes part and parcel a few bars later of the actual regular melody. He starts with the tonic. He starts with another motive, which I'm calling letter A, and then he goes to letter B, that motive. And then, lo and behold, he does a real pepper thing and goes to a real bebop figure, but it's the major 7 of the E minor chord. Lo and behold, we started out with that melodically with the pickup is a reference that way. It could be C major, it could be E minor, but nevertheless, it's the same notes. Now he's extending it to an unexpected note. It's E minor major 7, it's the D sharp there. And that's just a real surprise, a real beautiful melodic thing in of itself. But in terms of the harmonic direction that he's going in, this is very, very convincing because it's related to what happened earlier melodically with the pickup and the sense of C major. And now it's E minor, related key, but it's got a little spice, the D sharp. So that's a real beautiful motion, and he doesn't let go of it because he does it again on a strong beat in the next bar. So the emphasis changes rhythmically, but it's still there. And then he goes into a couple of, pretty standard bebop figures. But I thought it was real interesting that the secondary motive, that B, comes back as B1 in the next to the last, into the last bar, into the next to last staff. There you'll see it on the far right. I don't know who did this, whether this is a transcription or arrangement. I'm not familiar with this perhaps arrangement based on a Coltrane thing. But anyway, it was real clear to me that that next bar, F sharp, half diminished 7, B7 should be in there. Now again, he goes back to yet a little fragment of that secondary motive, B2. And then what I say call referring and developing. Now we're on what might as well be, for all intents and purposes, the bridge of the tune. And he's referring back to E minor again, and the E minor major 7, compositionally significant. And I think in the recording you're going to hear, I think that's in the arrangement, the Frank Bazille arrangement as well. So whoever arranged that, I don't know who did that. Gary, you must know.
Pretty sure that would have been Frank.
Okay. He was aware of that significance of that note there. But what it leads to is another reference to that pickup figure. Now we're on the bridge, but over the C sharp minor 7 flat 5, we've got that same pickup figure But now it's a completely different light. Again, this is really strong harmonic direction. It's almost Bach-like in that he's going to a related area, but he's making it spicier. And it's not E minor anymore. It's C sharp minor 7 flat 5. We go into a little bebop thing over the F sharp 7. He does the same in the second page, pick up figure in the first bar there. He still has that triad, but now it's B minor 7, and just goes through a kind of conventional motion there. But then that B motive comes yet back again, and you think, oh well, maybe we're going to go to E minor major 7 again. But lo and behold, he goes to C minor 6, which is a total surprise, and it makes total sense. It's variety. But it's also, it feels structurally, because of that E flat, the enharmonic significance of it, it just feels like, wow, it's a surprise, and yet it's not arbitrary. E flat is the melody note, E flat, D sharp, and yet it's harmonized differently. And C minor 6 to E7, that's a little unusual. And the way he gets there is by this really virtuosic motion melodically, in my opinion, with the real bebop figures there. And then we get a little space, we get the half cadence, which takes us back to letter A motive, the A section, for whatever it's worth. And B comes back again, A1 comes back again, as it always has. So it's pretty conventional for a few bars. But then he goes to the G11, G7 flat 9, and then we go back to C major there, and that motive comes back again, just where it says 2 coda, that little motive comes back again, and he stays in that same register. C minor 6 comes back again. Somewhat conventional, but it's economical. It's really economical, and it's just great line harmonically speaking, and also in terms of the harmonic rhythm to improvise on, as far as I'm concerned. The previous bar, the G11, G7 flat 9 that I wrote in, that's not in the sheet music, but it's clearly indicated there. First of all, the upward A minor triad that's melodically shown in that bar, again, relates to the other triads melodically. And then the second thing is, he never used that flat 9 in such a strong position before melodically. So in effect, it's kind of a sister to that D sharp or E flat that happens a few times. It kind of feels like, okay, we're in a moment of suspense again. And it's really nice. Just a very appropriate, yeah, right there. And then fairly conventional ending, but there's a surprise B flat note in the melody, yeah, right there, that really floored me. It has nothing to do with anything else, but it's almost monkish, and it obviously doesn't last for very long, but it's quite monkish, and it's sort of just puckishness, just sitting there for a moment. And then after that, there's a bebop reference there, badoo-da-da. That's, kind of his little tribute to, bebop. And then he's got, economically, he brings back a melodic figure from the intro. So there are 3 things about this tune. One is the harmonic direction is very solid. We feel a sense of tonality. We feel a return to that tonality. But at the same time, we go logically by the use of adroit repetition that never gets stale. And that's another thing that I think people have to learn. There's far too much use, in my opinion, of vamps or repeated figures that don't go anywhere. With Pepper's writing, the harmonic direction always not only has a direction, but there's this sense, as I said, of surprise and inevitability at the same time. It's craft. It's a harmonic craft. He has a lot of choices under his belt, and he always chooses the right ones. he chooses the right ones to create a little variety, to create a little surprise. And these are techniques that I feel should be more widely disseminated. Of course, they're with master writers, they happen a lot of the time, but I don't hear it enough. Again, I'm getting on my soapbox, so shoot me after this, but I just don't hear it enough in a lot of younger folks writing. And I'm not sure why that is, whether, the Great American Songbook hasn't been absorbed, or classical stuff, or just the really great hard bop writers like Benny Golson and Pepper and Coltrane, for that matter. I don't know. I really don't know. But I think this tune is a really good example of that. Maybe you can play the example. That's the Frank Bazille thing. So it's a larger ensemble, but if you go back to the top of the
Yep.
yeah.
This is Frank Basile's chart that you took off the website. Is that what this is?
No, this is just a lead sheet. And I checked it out with Frank's arrangement, and it's almost exactly the same. I mean, there's some counter lines and things like that, of course, in the brass and stuff like that. But in terms of the form and the melodic structure and the harmony.
And you were going to mention three important things about this, and I think you stated the first, and then you went on your soapbox. So maybe you can remember the other two after the tune.
Okay, yeah. Why don't you play the tune? Give me a chance to remember.
All right, here it comes, guys.
Yeah. Okay, good. That stirs my memory. Yeah, that B flat. I love that B flat. I just love it. And here's something that occurred to me. One of the other things I wanted to say, with things like that, this is a tune for the ages. And I would love to hear it in a slower version. I mean, you could hear it in so many different ways. A bossa nova, you could hear it, almost as a slow walking ballad or something, because there's those little delicious details in it, like that B flat, that for an arranger is really ripe for, developing a little bit more. And that's another mark. That's another one of the things I want to say is another mark of this, to me, what a great songwriter is that the possibilities the tune implies are endless. And this is what he's done. I actually could never, until I heard the Frank Bazille arrangement, I could never imagine it that way. But it works great. But to me, again, it could also be these other forms real easily. It could be a lot of things. It could, quite frankly, I know someone else is going to discuss Pepper's ballads, but Pepper's ballads are very sensual often and evocative, and I could even hear this that way if it was really, really slow. I could even hear somebody adroit enough in the singing world, some younger version of Eddie Jefferson, I guess, but to put lyrics to it, bebop kind of lyrics in some way, because it's a very strong melody. It's got a wide tessitura, but I know singers who could do it. So to me, that's one of those three things. Is aside from the harmonic direction, which I can't emphasize too much, is so important. It's just so important. This incredible balance he has between cohesiveness and yet variety, so that you're never bored. You never feel like there's repetition. Anyway. That's the second thing, and I'll remember the third thing if somebody wants to comment. Any comments?
Ken is writing in the chat that he's kind of bugged that he never pulled that chart out when he played with him. Nice tune. Yeah, thanks, Ken.
Thanks for being here, Ken. I think you're muted. Speaking of arranging Pepper's tunes, Jeremy Kahn made 3 albums of arrangements of Pepper's tunes, so he'll be able to riff off of some of the things that Bevan pointed out, I'm sure, about changing things from just a straight ahead bebop tune to a bossa nova, for example, or a samba, or taking a ballad and whatever that word is, transmogrifying.
Transmogrifying.
Bevan,
Yeah.
did you want to talk about Urban Dreams, or is that somebody else's tune that they're going to discuss?
That's someone else's tune. I wanted to point out something in a tune of mine that relates to this because again, I'm getting a little bit on the soapbox, once having been a teacher, always a teacher.
Why stop now?
Yeah, right. But one of the things Pepper does, the third thing is in this bridge, for example, the bridge of this tune, there's this subtle, shall we say, modulation. The E minor major 7 suddenly becomes very important. And yet it's not at all unrelated to what happened before, because the melodic structure, this is the point I'm trying to make, is taken from the pickup of the tune, at least starts out that way. So there's this unifying factor that's just, for lack of a better word, Beethoven-esque. The bridge, of course, is a wonderful place to do that because it's intended to create variety. So that E minor major 7 thing, and then the C sharp minor 7 flat 5, C sharp minor 7 flat 5 thing, leading into the B minor 7, which of course is, so related to G major anyway, so it's cohesive that way. But the sound of that, oh, hold on, I have the page here. You guys took it off the screen. The sound of the C sharp minor 7 flat 5.
I'll put it right back, Bevan. Hold on.
Okay. I just want to point out, this is a surprise move. This is a surprise move, and yet in the end, we find out that, damnation, it leads us back. It's starting, we don't even know it yet, but it starts to lead us back through this little hill and valley that's exacerbated by that C minor 6 on page 2, last bar of the first staff. And then it gets referred to again in the A section, of course. We knew that was going to happen. But now, once we hear it in the A section again, we say, aha, okay, he did something with it, and now we're back to normal. So that movement in the bridge creates variety, and yet without us knowing for sure where it's going to go, it's deliberately designed to lead us back. It's planning. It's deliberately designed to lead us back, to a satisfying A section, which then sort of gives us a sense of relaxation, a sense of aha, okay, we didn't quite know how we were going to get back there. And that D sharp and that E minor 7, E minor major 7, the C sharp minor 7 flat 5 are very, very integral in doing that. So what I'm trying to say is, Pepper can go far away, but he's going to come back. And I just want to show you another example of that, just a slightly different way of thinking. I'm sure there are other writers who do this, but I just couldn't help thinking about this tune of mine, if we have time. I just want to show you one spot in it that's just, for lack of a better word, for me, very Pepper-esque. I wasn't thinking of Pepper when I wrote it, but so this is a bossa nova, or can be a tango as well. And if you look at the beginning of the tune after the introduction in bar 9, we're very solidly in B minor, a B flat minor, and we stay there for a long time. But I use this, just as Pepper uses melodic elements to bring cohesiveness, but with a different harmonic underpinning, I'm doing the same thing here. If you look at the opening little motive, bar 9, you see that shape there. I really milk the hell out of that. But then when I get to what might as well be the bridge, bar 17, I'm using the same melodic idea, but now I'm really kind of far away from B flat minor. I made that deliberate choice. I'm really far away from B flat minor, and it continues that way for a little while. I think, and then eventually, G flat minor, that initial G flat minor in bar 17, just the way Pepper used that E flat minor major 7, transforming itself a couple of times. Then I do the same thing with bar 29, G flat minor comes back again, but in a very different way. I get pretty far away from B flat minor, but my feeling is that because of stepwise motion often, or 2/5s, everything feels inevitable. So maybe just to play the tune would probably explain more than me talking about it.
Yep, here it comes.
And then we're back to B flat minor, of course, with the 5 chord. So, and you can hear this kind of thing in a lot of different really well-built tunes, but again, I'm not, very often I'm hearing too much reliance on vamps or on staying in the same place harmonically, so that there isn't this sort of sense of harmonic direction that you want to hear. A lot of this here in this particular tune is stepwise motion as opposed to Pepper's 2/5s. But there's that same element of moving away pretty far, from the original key. And again, it amounts to choices. And I often wonder, with some pieces that I hear, why aren't choices being made? Why are you stuck in a rut? Here's a famous example, in my opinion, and feel free to dispute me on this, because I can't remember the recording. Maybe the recording is different. But in the sheet music, Joe Henderson, for example, great tune writer, of course. We all know, Recordame, et cetera, et cetera. Black Narcissus, stuff like that. But one of his tunes, Punjab, is extremely repetitive. It starts out great. It's very apparent that he was fascinated by Coltrane's, ironclad structure of giant steps, because it's got that same emphasis on, a fair amount of major sounding stuff, but it never gets away from it, ever. And the same harmonic figure keeps getting repeated a number of times. And you wonder why he didn't modulate or why he didn't move to a different place. Nothing wrong with the melody, but it gets really weighted down that way. It's the only tune of his that I found fault with that way. But with a lot of younger writers, I'm hearing this more and more often. I don't know why that is. My theory, which may be wrong, is that in their playing experience, they just haven't dug into the standard rep, so to speak, enough. Whether it's Great American Songbook or Ellington or hard bop stuff, as I mentioned, Benny Golson would be, a great model for a lot of people. Even if you're writing in the most contemporary modern style, just to look at his stuff, in the same way that you look at Pepper's stuff, I think would be really invaluable. So if you know any 18-year-old kids who are trying to write tunes, just beat the hell out of them with this kind of thing.
Interestingly, Pepper did record Punjab on his record Encounter. I don't know if you've heard it.
No, and I'd be very curious how he did it, how he overcame, at least in the sheet music, that structure. It's a very, utilizes a lot of pentatonic stuff melodically, but the same harmonic couple of bars, harmonic rhythm and harmonic choices happen over and over, especially at the end. And it drove me nuts. So I wonder what he did with it, just don't know. But again, that's in sharp contrast to, Joe's other tunes, which are, of course, to me, impeccable. Anyway, I just wanted to emphasize that point, moving away from where you are, but moving away in a way that feels inevitable, and yet you have a couple of surprises in it. For me, that's always been one of Pepper's big inspirations. And I hope that a lot of, I hope that people take that, think about that. But it involves, making, having a lot of harmonic choices at your disposal. And, one of the things, I don't know if this goes hand in hand with Pepper's improvising. It was interesting. People were talking about Mulligan versus Pepper and how Pepper, he just used the horn a lot more. But also, let's face it, he was a lot more chromatic, and a lot more detailed in his, his adaptation of bebop stuff into the hard bop area. He carried that with him, whereas Mulligan, was, like somebody said, a line player. His modus operandi stemmed more from the swing era, and cool, of course, we know that. But again, I don't know, the improvisation and the writing probably intersects at some point. I think that's always the case with really active players. So anyway, enough, somebody else.
Jeremy, you want to take over? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to hear everybody's perspective on Pepper. It's been fascinating. How do you want to handle this, Gary? You want me to just spew for a minute, or you want to ask me some questions?
No, go ahead. I mean, you did all those arrangements of Pepper's tunes. You did 3 albums.
Yeah, well,
in the quartet thing, on a trio date, and then the vocal date with Pat LaBarbera and Eric Alexander. So
yeah,
you have a lot of experience with these tunes.
Yeah, and sadly, I haven't had that much occasion to revisit these tunes. I want to see if I can do something about that, because I first knew Pepper as an amazing player. It's interesting to hear the contrast between him and Mulligan. To me, Pepper's sound was about 10 times bigger than Jerry Mulligan. I think his hero was Harry Carney, and the one time I got to play with Pepper, he quoted Harry Carney about the approach to playing Barry sax, and Harry Carney told him that at the end of a gig, if your shorts aren't brown, you haven't been playing the horn correctly. So that's the most delicate way that I can put it. So I'm not sure that Jerry Mulligan ever browned his pants. But I'll move on. So Gary gave me the great opportunity to do 3 records of all Pepper tunes with a minimum amount of overlap and all different configurations. The first one was a trio. Second one, we added Gary Smulian, a very logical choice. And the third was for a larger group. But as I think Bevan said, or I'll take what you said and run with it. One of the hallmarks of a great tune, a great composition, is that you can do it in an infinite number of ways, only really limited by your own imagination and taste. So that the third record that Gary wanted me to do had kind of some built-in baggage. First thing he said was, I want to do a record of all Pepper's ballads, but almost none of them will be ballads. And I've got an idea of how I want each of them to be. And I said, oh, great, that'll be fun. I want it to be a tenor sax battle. So I really love Eric Alexander and Pat LaBarbera. I thought, okay, great. But the first level of the challenge was going to be, all right, I've never met either of these people. So in my arranging, we have a very finite amount of time to get this stuff together. I want it to be creative, but I have no idea. I know these guys can play their butts off, but how well do they read? How well do they sight read? So I tried to make their dots on the page interesting, but not full of crazy math tests that they might scuffle with when they were reading it. The next level was the introduction of a vocalist, another person whom I'd never met. So we had to figure out what her vocal range was, and Gary's friend wrote lyrics, am I right, to all these?
Yeah, Barry Wallenstein, old professor of mine at City College, wrote the lyrics.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even sure how to line up the notes, so then we got Adam Birnbaum to line everything up and prepare it for you. It was complicated.
Yeah, it all lined up pretty well. But I remember there was at least one tune in which Alexis was having some problems because of the content of the text maybe being not in alignment with the kind of perky feel that the tune was. I don't remember which one it was, but the lyrics were kind of dark, maybe something about a marriage falling apart, or and we were doing this happy version of it. That's my recollection anyway. But so we had two tenors, vocal, piano, bass, and drums, all other than me, very strong personalities. I'm just a people person and a delicate flower, of course. But so these arrangements had to be made so that everybody had their moment in the sun, particularly for our two tenor divas. I knew on some level they would be scoping each other out in a friendly but competitive way, and I didn't want for one of them to have more space than the other, so I tried to make that equitable. And finally, for my own enjoyment, I'm not really a composer, but I do like arranging things, particularly for a 5-6 piece band. And I had a lot of fun sort of creating my own frames for these tunes, writing kind of involved intros and outros and interludes to get from the instrumental stuff into the vocals. And I enjoyed that a lot. And I did listen to Julian this morning, and it occurred to me that I did kind of a really old school thing. I used to play in this band called Vince Giordano's Nighthawks. And bands from the 20s and 30s, the singer was a side person. So they would have to wait for the band to play all the way through the tune and then sing their one chorus and then go sit down, and that would be it. And Alexis doesn't come in on that tune until we're like, 4 minutes in. And I wonder if that's what I was thinking as a precedent when I lined things up that way. But I was very pleased how everything came out, even though there was a fair amount of herding cats, as they say, with it.
So you're referencing mostly the vocal date, which is the more recent date of the three that you did, but you started by doing a trio recording. That was the first project we did, which turned out beautifully.
Thanks. So, yeah, all three had. I tried to put my own thumbprint on it. Pepper's tunes. I'll just swing around as a player. They're great, but they're like Benny Golson's tunes. So Bevan, that was a great comp, I think. There's always at least one or two moments where if you stop paying attention, you're gonna step all over your stuff. So you got to be. There are surprises baked in that you have to be. That seem to be on some level a surprise every time you come around and play them again. It's like, oh yeah, this thing. I got to be ready for that. So I know Smolian said something about it. I think both Eric Alexander and Pat LaBarbera mentioned the navigating Pepper's changes, although completely logical, have their moments where you have to be careful.
Rob Amster, the bass player, said the same thing, that you can't sleep on it. If you think it's a 2-5-1, it's going somewhere else.
Yeah, I think Amster did say something about that. Maybe even Dennis Carroll too.
Yeah.
You think, oh, I know what this is, and then you take your eyes off the paper, and it's like, oh no. So, but yeah, I did try to do a little bit of arranging in both the trio and the quartet date, just so I could put my own mark on it rather than being a carbon copy of whatever versions Pepper himself had out there. And I like I said, I only got to play with him once. It was at the Singapore Jazz Festival. A bunch of us in our 20s. One of them had an ex-girlfriend whose dad was connected to the mob over there, I think, and had an in to the festival. And my friend Tim Warner, the drummer, he said, "Oh, I've always wanted to play with Pepper. Let's see if let me track him down and see if I give him enough money, would he come?" And he said, "Yeah." So there the three of us were, with not a ton of experience, playing with this master. And of course, you want to follow everything that they do. And at the intermission, he had been sitting way back on the beat, on a ballad probably, and the tune really slowed down, and he gave us a very stern lecture in between sips of cognac backstage. And so we learned a lesson about the rhythm section having to hold their ground even when the soloist appears not to be quite connected, because they could be just darting in and out. Sometimes they're on top, sometimes they're stretching way back. So you just have to be aware that that's not an adjustment of the metronome.
That's great. Ronnie, are you there? Because
I am. I'm cooking. I'm sorry. I had to run to the store. I'm cooking, and
you're
I've been
multitasking.
listening to all of this. It's incredible. All of the analyzing of Pepper's music, and yeah, I'm here.
Well, I thought we'd change the direction and have you jump in if you don't mind, because Jeremy played with Pepper in Singapore in 83.
84.
84. And Ronnie, you played with him the next year. And what was it like with his sense of time and darting in and out? And Jeremy just made mention to the fact that you got to keep the time where it is. Let Pepper do his thing.
So it was very interesting, my time with Pepper. I didn't spend nearly as much time as I wanted to, but Pepper was dying when we were on the road. So I got to hear a lot of wonderful stories about his time doing things in and out, hanging around with Miles Davis and other people. And it was also very sad because, his wife at that time had left him and taken all of his money. Right after the end of that tour, she had came back. Pleasantly, he called me and told me that, which was just wild. The whole thing was wild. But as we were, in terms of let me get back to what you asked about time. I was the only, I was Black. We had two other players with us that were from Italy. I think it was Dodo Gaia and Dado Moroni. He was very, very, very young. So Pepper leaned on me heavily, not just for the stories, but also to interpret the music how he wanted. And so, yes, I mean, he didn't have any problems with me. He just told me what the time was, and we were off and running. We did have some issues with the bass player losing the time because we would just go, and I think Pepper knew my work. I had got, thank God, to Billy Hart. That's how I got the gig because I was subbing for Billy. But Pepper had seen me play with a few other people before, and he reminded me of that. So he said, "Well, I'm not gonna have any problem with you with time." But I'm the type of player where I love keeping the time, but I also love expanding the time. I had already been playing with McCoy Tyner, and we did a lot of interesting things with time. I had played with Woody Shaw and Wayne Shorter, and we had done very interesting things with time. But in terms of Pepper, I was free. I was pretty much free. I never. All he did with me was play, and I think that was also because he knew he wasn't going to be around. Like, for example, we'd be in the van traveling up some mountain or something in Italy or somewhere, and he would just be telling me all these stories, and then he would go to sleep. I mean, into like a deep sleep because his energy level was not there in the traveling part or anything in between. But as soon as we got to the stage, I would be, I would sometimes go to his hotel room, make sure he was ready. We help him get ready, do whatever he needed. Once we hit the bandstand, he was like a teenager. I mean, the energy that he got when he put the horn in his mouth was unbelievable. And I was just, every time it was like, for me, it was like a miracle because I'm like, wow, this guy, we're sitting in the van and it's like, I'm sitting right next to him in the van or right behind him. And it's like his hair is falling out and he's talking and he's got, he's excited about the stories, but he doesn't have the energy that, you would expect somebody telling those types of stories. But then when he put the horn in his mouth, he counted off a tune. It was just unbelievable for me. I learned so much about what music does for a person when you are that passionate about music. It just uplifts everything. And he was, like I said, he was a powerhouse from the downbeat to the end of the concert. And he always had enough left for an encore. And then after that, he was pretty much, he needed his rest. But yeah, I don't know, man. It was one of the most outstanding opportunities I've had because I grew up hearing Pepper. I also played a lot and recorded a lot with Hammy and Blewett. Hammy and Blewett love Pepper. And Hammy and Blewett is not one of those players. He plays in and out. He was an amazing player himself. But to know his work and then to have had that opportunity to tour with him was amazing. And I think, Gary, if I'm not mistaken, he wasn't here too much longer after that tour.
No, he was basically dying of cancer when you were with him. He had had
Yeah, I
several
mean, I know
treatments,
he was.
and
Yeah,
Jeremy worked with him when he had cancer but didn't know it, and that's why you two are perfect bookends in terms of
yeah,
your experiences.
I have a question for you, Ronnie.
yes,
When we were doing our sound check in Italy, I remember Pepper standing on the stage looking up to wherever the sound guy was, and he was really firm with this little speech, and I wonder if you ever heard it too. He said, "Now, when you find the correct level, please
don't
don't
touch it.
ever again," because this is what somebody was talking about before. If I start playing louder and you bring me down, or I start playing softer and you bring me up, then what was the point of me playing louder or softer? He was like he was talking to a kindergartner or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that well because he would always say these guys want to be part of the band and they're not part of the band. That's why we do the sound check. So we set our levels. After that, don't touch it. Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like a speech that he had given before, so I'm not surprised that you heard the
Yeah.
exact same thing.
That was part of his repertoire, the first thing, man. But he was, I think a lot of that tour, some of the places we did get to, I know a couple places they took the same sound crew, so he was pretty happy about that. And I think that was due to some other, conversations with the promoters, knowing that he was ill and just trying to make it, as easy as and comfortable for him as possible.
So
But yeah,
he wasn't starting from scratch every gig. Yeah.
exactly. A couple of them things I think were close proximity of one another. But
Uh-huh.
but he was just such an amazing player. I mean, I've been blessed. All the players I've been able to play with, I mean, Pepper to me, I heard a lot of people say, he's a hardcore bebopper, but to me, he was more than that because I mean, I heard him scream on the horn. I heard him doing things that, outside of the boundaries of bebop itself. So I don't
Growling
know.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm stepping on anybody's ideas or concepts of feet, but for me, Pepper was an all-around player. And that tour, while he was dying, it was like he was trying new things. I never felt like he was staying safe at all because I'm sweating at the end of the night trying to keep up with this guy, and his ideas. I try to play drums and interpret harmony and melody as I play drums, so my way of playing is very, antiphonal. It's a lot of call and response with especially with the leader. And Pepper allowed me that freedom, and we just had a lot of fun. I mean, I feel good that I believe he was happy with my playing because I never heard anything except when we were done was like, yeah, and then he started going into his stories for as long as he could stay awake. So, yeah, I'm honored to be a part of this roundtable, hearing all these other sides and stories. I had a lot of the people I worked with. Now, I'm curious, though. I do have a question because somebody says that he left Thad and Mel in 75, but
77. 77.
77. Okay. But, I moved to New York in 78, 79, and I did some subbing for Mel, and I distinctly remember Pepper being at some of the Vanguard hits playing.
He might have subbed in occasionally or something.
Yeah, I think he subbed in because the way I really got to get close to him was through Sir Roland Hanna, who was there. And from Sir Roland Hanna, that's why actually Sir Roland Hanna got me on my first recording date with some people. And after that, I played 10 years with Richard Davis, because after Freddie Waits passed, I took the chair. So, but that's how I remember the three of us, really doing some really wonderful work when I subbed for Mel at the Vanguard. And I was just a kid. And Pepper was really, really cool with me. He was like, "Don't worry about it, play it. You read better the next time," because I wasn't a great reader at that time whatsoever. But Mel liked my playing, Dad liked my playing, and then so he asked me to sub, and I did quite a few of those things actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we're glad you're here. Aaron, do you have Dr. Deep queued up? Because we have a recording that Ronnie did with Pepper, and I just love the way you play over the melody. The
Yeah,
fidelity is a little sketchy. Were you able to improve it any?
sadly, I was not. I ran it through some of these different There's these AI supposed to clean up it. Nothing sounded any better than the one you sent me. So that's what we.
Can we play some of that? I mean, because
Play it
I got
anyway.
it. Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think the feeling of it is there.
And
Yeah.
Jeremy, this is a tune that you had a little trouble interpreting. You just couldn't get anything with it, so you did it in a McCoy style. Remember that one? Or
Yeah, I
you'll remember when
do.
you hear it.
I remember.
Here it comes, guys. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those tunes where we had them beautiful harmonic movements where instead of it being just one of those vamps, it gives a couple of little chords and you're somewhere else. It's a beautiful song. Yeah, thank you, man.
You do such a great job of embellishing it, and those rolls, it's great.
I play that one every gig, and the way you did that, I want you to come do that because
I'm available.
Man. Yeah, let's talk.
You're in Seattle, right?
Ronnie, it's so good, man. You know, we were talking earlier in the roundtable today with Bevan's conversation about Pepper's dynamics and how it was, he would use it to just really great emotional effect. And man, you were just right there, just nailing that stuff, man. It sounds so good.
Thank you so much, man. I loved Pepper so much. It was like I was just heartbroken that I didn't have more time with him. You know what I mean? Because again, when he played, it was just all out there. It was just all on the line, and he allowed me to interact with him that type of way. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. I miss him tremendously. You know.
I,
Yeah.
I just want to say, Ronnie, that's exactly, what you're talking about. Pepper had this generosity. It's built into the tunes, but
Yeah.
without even saying anything, he's asking you make that contribution. And so that was so beautiful. And I just want to say the colors, it's a little hard to hear, but I could hear the colors you used. You
Yeah.
know, it must have delighted him to, have that because you're really playing the tune. You're not just playing time, time. You're playing
Yeah.
you're playing the harmony, you know.
Yeah, that's what we talked about that. He was like, "How did you?" He was like, "I said, well, I've always been, I play piano too, but I've always been one to. I'm not just a timekeeper. The music just, and especially when it's a great writer, when the music is pulling all of those other elements out of you. I was just happy and blessed that he allowed me to play like that, and we had a great time. We had a great time. He was very generous. His music was just so amazing. I mean, just beautiful writing. You know. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I
Gary.
say something real quick?
Yeah.
Ronnie, it's nice to meet you. I just realized
You as
I
well.
pulled the CD out from my shelf, and I realized that I knew your name from that. Ronnie Cuber. Yeah, Live
Yeah.
at Blue Note, which is '86, actually, right? That would have been right about around when Pepper passed away, actually. But anyway,
Yeah, that was right
an
after
epiphany
that.
I had.
That's crazy too, because that we just did Ronnie's memorial last year, which I helped organize, and it was pretty sad too, man. But he loved Pepper. Um, he loved Pepper. It was, Ronnie was crazy, but that recording is deep. It's got Randy Brecker and the late Dr. Lonnie Smith.
Dr. Lonnie Smith.
And speaking of, hold on, I gotta say this because we had quite a few conversations today about sound engineers. That was the worst recording ever because, it's the worst recording, audio recording that I've ever done because the sound engineer was horrible, and for some reason they never got Lonnie's B3, the fan, for the
Leslie.
organ.
The
So
Leslie.
he's literally playing out of a bass amp.
Oh no!
So everybody was
That's
pissed
terrible.
off on that day. It was crazy.
Picture of you there.
Yep, the Blue Note.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's it. Yeah, thank you, man.
I interviewed
Yeah.
Ronnie about Pepper, and he told me about the times when he used to go down and hear him in Harlem play with Donald Byrd. And he said, I tried to play like Pepper. I took it as far as I could go, and then I couldn't go any farther.
Right.
I couldn't get any more out of it. Couldn't go. But he
Yeah.
was generous too. Okay, we have two more. Any questions for Ronnie? Thanks so
Can
much.
I say one final thing? And then I have to get to a gig, but when Pepper had such an amazing vocabulary as an improviser, and his, if you look at his solos that have been transcribed, that's sacred text, and you can learn so much. But specifically, when I start to explain what's going on to my students about the diminished scale and how that is applied to the jazz vocabulary, there was no greater master than Pepper. If you want to learn what the diminished scale does, just listen to pretty much any one of his solos and you'll get some tremendously valuable information.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Yeah.
And that's what
Hey,
Phil.
will we also have, Gary, will we have copies of this recording?
Yeah, well, Aaron will send you an edited version. Yeah, and it'll be posted on YouTube and then also at pepperadams.com.
Yeah, because I love for my students to listen and learn.
Yeah, and there's
'Cause I,
five already that are posted that you can hear. All sorts of people
okay,
talking about
beautiful,
Pepper, including
beautiful.
Bevan on previous, and Noah and Aaron on previous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, carry on with your cooking, and thank you so much for your contribution. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you guys. I want to keep listening. You got a couple more
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah, Noah, and then Aaron will finish it up. Noah, go ahead.
All right, thank you
Cool.
guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna let me switch mics. I'm gonna play the piano a little bit. Aaron, would you play just the head to reflectory with the, and would you be able to pull up the lead sheet? So beautiful with George Mraz. Okay, can everybody hear the piano? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear it.
Okay, cool. Very good. Okay. If you switch back to my view, I have the PDF up on my view. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm gonna essentially, I decided to give a little presentation on the album, on the album Reflectory, to talk about the programming. I mean, this is a masterpiece album, an artistic statement, in almost every metric, compositionally, and in terms of programming too, and everything. So obviously the title track is the first thing on the recording. One of the things I'm going to do, talking about these tunes, is kind of connect Pepper's compositional style to Barry Harris, who he of course came up with in Detroit. He called him Uncle Barry. He said he learned everything from Barry. And actually, this is nice. This is a nice thing, but Barry's style of his theoretical concept and style of teaching has become really popular on the internet in the last couple of years. So there's been a lot of different people who have shared perspectives on his way of thinking, and so I'd like to contribute essentially some of the way that you can look at Pepper's music. I'm not saying this is necessarily what he was thinking when he was writing, because I don't know, but you can look at it through the lens that Barry looked at music, and you can find a lot of depth and answer some questions and open up some questions, of course. But anyway, so this first tune, Reflectory. The first thing you hear is this George Mraz's part. First of all, these two notes, B, A flat, B, and G, none of that comes out of a major scale. So to the trained ear, or really even to the intuitive ear, it just doesn't sound, it's very kind of an unsettling sound. And then it's revealed, of course, the chords that go on top on top of this, A flat is a C major 7, or C major 7 with a 9. So it's not an A flat, well, it is an A flat chord, but it doesn't have a fifth, the proper fifth. It has an augmented fifth. It has a third, augmented fifth, major 7th, a sharp 9, and a sharp 11. It's this incredible sound. It's not a diatonic major sound. It's just this very extended kind of very exotic sound, and it's the first thing you hear on the record. The most exotic thing on the record is the first thing you hear, which is just beautiful. So, and then it's a vamp. And then that is, of course, a G7 that's been altered in every way, by every note possible. Both of these are 6-note chords. It's a D flat 7, of course, but over G, so it's a G altered. So it's essentially this. What's happening is a 1 to 5, but below there's this recontextualization that takes you completely out. The A flat, it doesn't feel like 1 to 5, and then finally it breaks out of the vamp and into the melody in the first chord. I'll switch the view. Maybe I should turn on both microphones for the sake of coming over here to talk. I've got kind of an operation going on here. The first chord here is proper C major, which is when the dual melody kind of begins. And it's, of course, the title, obviously, reflectory. The two melodies reflect one another. It's like off of water, like the cover art. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how many ways in which this album, is cohesive as an artistic statement. And even on the back, the text they used for reflectory, it's got this kind of broken pattern. I just think it's so fun. So anyway, actually that's the same text on the cover. But so we get along with C in C, and so once we come out of that intro, we get into this incredibly Pepper Adams-esque sequence where we're going up a half step in key every 2 bars. So we start in C major, and then we go to D flat, which is a simple 2/5, and of course, and then on to D, and then on to E flat, right, and then back to, and then it turns us back around to C, and of course you can just look at it plainly and say, okay, it's just basic jazz modulations. But one of the ways that Barry would talk about this, I'm going to explain the fundamental, kind of the basis of his concept really briefly, because it's critical to understanding how this works. I'm sure actually a lot of people on this call know how this works, because I'm sure a lot of people have either studied with Barry or seen things, educational content that he generated or about him. But his basic idea was that the simplest form of a major chord was a 6 chord, major 6. So this is C6, C, E, G, and A. And that there was a diminished 7th chord that goes along with it. That would be B diminished in this case. And if you take those 2 chords, which are both 4 notes, so that's 8 notes total, you can play a scale, which Barry referred to as a 6th diminished scale. And the only difference from a major scale here is that there's a flat 6th involved, as well as a 5th and a natural 6th. So there's a chromatic move right there. What this means is that you have a symmetrical scale that can function rhythmically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? So you come back to note number 1 on beat number 1. Okay, so it has some utility in those ways. But the other thing you can do is you can harmonize. Like if I play a C6 here and I move each note up through the scale, we find a diminished chord, and then each note up in the scale again, we are now we're right back to the same that same 6th chord, but in a new inversion. Of course, C is on top, not on the bottom. So you can do this all the way up. Of course, we're getting kind of high on the piano there, but anyway, you can do this all the way up, and so it creates the opportunity when you're playing a tune to kind of open up some new movement and things. You're not just locked into all I can play is these, 4 notes, C, E, G, B, right? That's C major 7th, of course. But of course, Pepper, if you notice, one of the things he always does on his lead sheets is any major chord is not specified. Sometimes it is, but most often major chords are just the tonic note. It's just a C is written, not C major 7, not C6. Personally, I think there's a reason for this. I think it comes out of this maybe common way of thinking that he might have adopted from Barry. So anyway, the reason I'm pointing this out here is because C and E flat minor 7. So these are the first 2 chords of the main form. Sorry, I can't face you all. It's kind of awkward, but that's whatever. C and E flat major 7. Okay. What's interesting about them is that, again, if you just bear with me, the diminished, which is related to C, is B diminished. Okay. B diminished, of course, is symmetrical. B diminished is D diminished, is F diminished, is A flat diminished. Okay, we have to kind of think beyond the inversions here. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about exactly, I'm happy to field questions, but I believe everybody in the room is a musician and knows what I'm talking about. So C, and that's the diminished that belongs to it. E flat minor 7 also has a diminished that belongs to it. As it happens, it's the exact same diminished. Okay, so you can what this means is that you can be walking up and then land. Now we're in the D flat, right? So like I was moving through on the C chord and I moved into the E flat minor 7, which took us into the 2-5 and took us to D flat. And you can continue this with this pattern. That's what's beautiful about this sequence. It's not just an arbitrary move where he's saying we're just going to move in half steps. There's connection between the chords. Like again, C and E flat minor 7 or D flat and E minor 7. These don't seem like they have any relationship to one another, but they actually are linked by a common diminished, or and that diminished, of course, is where its 5 chord comes from. So, let's see. Second. So the vamp first chord sequence. Okay, and so the A section repeats, of course. We follow the sequence. It's going up in half steps, C to D flat to D to E flat, and then it actually just comes right back to C. So it's sort of like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. It has the cyclical effect, and of course the way he achieves that is from the E flat, instead of going on then to F sharp minor B7, he goes to D flat 7. Why does he go to D flat 7? Well, E flat, once again, just like how the diminished related to C is B diminished. Well, it's actually the same diminished that E flat is related to, and it's the same diminished that D flat 7 comes out of. Okay, so if this is another Barry concept. So if we take that diminished, if we take a D diminished, D, F, A flat, B, and we borrow one note over, so this is the D flat going down to D, sorry, it's the D natural going down to D flat. That's the D diminished. That's the D flat 7, right? So this is where dominant 7th chords come from, according to Barry Harris. So we know that we can actually do that off of any given note in the diminished 7th chord. The F can go down to E, and we have E7. The A flat can go down to G, and we have G7 now. And the B can go down a half step to B flat, and we have B flat 7. Okay, so these four different dominant 7th chords are all linked by a singular diminished 7th chord that they're all based on. And so the 5 chord to C is G7, right? And of course D flat 7 is tritone substituted. tritone substituted 5 chord, but that's where it comes from. That's because G and D flat 7 share a diminished chord that they're based on. And this is straight Barry Harris thinking here. And of course the 5 chord that relates to E flat in that bar, the 5 chord that relates to it is B flat 7. So B flat 7 is in that family too. So it's no major harmonic departure in this world of thinking to make that move, but it's not a common move that you see in standards necessarily. And certainly this is one way of justifying it theoretically. And so anyway, if you're thinking about Barry's method as a way of generating concepts, or generating generating ideas for movement, this is certainly a very effective way to find new ideas, and it seems like this might have been one of the ways that Pepper was thinking. Okay, so, but after the second A section, it does depart from this snake eating its own tail, and this is here when we go to the bridge. It actually, instead of going to that D flat 7, it actually does go on to the F sharp minor to B7, and then the bridge is in E. So it follows the same sequence to take us out into the bridge. And then the bridge is very interesting. There's a lot of detail here, and I'd love to investigate all aspects. I'm just trying to focus on one way of looking at this, though. So for the sake of brevity, E going to A7, going to A flat 7, we're just hanging out in a general E key area. So we're just going to leave it at that. This is especially noted by the fact that the A flat 7 has a sharp 9, which of course is the 5th of E. So it's a general E key area. It's all that really matters for this discussion, because then the pattern continues. Again, my dog is crying at me. Sorry. The pattern then continues yet further from there, going from key of E to G minor 7, C7 to F. Stop that. Don't do that. I'm so sorry. G minor 7 to C, going to F. We followed this sequence that Pepper has set up all the way from the key of C up in half steps to this 5th bar of the bridge, where we're at key of F now. And of course, F to a minor 2/5 that actually subversively resolves to D. F and D are separated by a minor 3rd, which again, minor thirds diminished. A diminished chord is a stack of minor thirds. Okay, so any keys that are minor thirds apart are related by a common diminished chord. In this case, C sharp diminished. So by going from F to D, there's again multiple ways to look at that. In standard, in the Great American Songbook, it's very common to go from F to D minor, right? I mean, you hear that all over the place. Sorry. And then you would continue, right? Whatever. So this is pretty standard stuff, except Pepper, instead of going to D minor, it's a D major. Again, multiple ways to look at that. But what is interesting is that if you're looking at this in terms of the sequence being set up, which is sort of the harmonic and structural thesis of this tune, we follow it. We follow up to E and then to F, and then the next logical key to go to would be F sharp or G flat, I guess. Of course, we don't do that. We go back to C, but he had the snake eating its own tail, and then he broke out of it, and he actually made it loop around again and then eat its tail again. So we go, what would be G flat next winds up being C, because of course G flat and C tritone apart, which is 2 minor thirds. They're both in the same diminished family. And so here we go. We circle all the way back to the A section again. And then, of course, at the end of the tune, I got that wrong. Oh, yeah. No, I had it right. And then that's beautiful. That turnaround at the end there is E flat to D flat 7 to C. You know, and there's two melodies happening, of course, and so George's part is down here, you know, so and that resolves up a half step. That B flat goes up to B. Anyway, that turnaround is important. We'll come back to that. That E flat to D flat to C turnaround. So then, of course, the album, we go on from Reflectory, and then we go into Harry Carney's classic Sophisticated Lady. And they do an incredible rendition of that, where sort of the one of the major themes of this album too, by the way, is the contrast, the two voice sort of story being told between bass and baritone saxophone. There's the two voice thing, and this first tune is obviously the epitome of this. But Sophisticated Lady, halfway through the recording, the rhythm section breaks down and it gets into this dual improvisation between George and Pepper, and they're just playing all over the top of one another. We could play some of that, but for the sake of time, we might just go back to it. But it's really great, and it's a further continuation of the story. So, Reflectory, Sophisticated Lady. Again, a lot to say about Sophisticated Lady, but it's a great opportunity to hear Pepper go nuts on a classic baritone saxophone torch song. And then the next thing after that is Etude Diabolique, which is one of Pepper's tunes. Again, we're not going to analyze this, but it's a rhythm changes, and it's an etude, which of course is an etude is an exercise, and he wrote this sort of exercise for himself with these insane diminished patterns, and so of course that's not a small note, it's a significant note. Etude Diabolique, further elaborating on the diminished language and writing. You know, the opportunities available. He uses diminished in every inversion, every pattern of diminished you could almost think of, all over this rhythm changes. It's an incredible. And he wrote a sequel to it a couple years later, Etude Diabolique 2. But okay, anyway, so that's the whole first side. And what's beautiful about this first side, I realized, you know, the phrase mind, heart, and body, you know, or some elaboration on that. I mean, Reflectory is for the mind, Sophisticated Lady is for the heart, and Etude Diabolique is for the body. I actually wrote the fingers because that is what it's for. But you know, it's just these are universal themes, and I guarantee that this was not lost on Pepper when he programmed it like this. By the way, this is one of his two favorite of his own personal favorites of his records. The other one was on the same label a couple years later. So, okay. Then we go on to side B. And the first thing on side B is Pepper's dedication to his wife, who he had just married 2 years before this, or less. Or just over 2 years before this. Claudette's Way, which is a wonderful waltz. And Aaron, if you would play Claudette's Way, just ahead. Go ahead. Okay, so it's in F minor. which in and of itself, just by being in that key, is kind of a response to reflectory. And this tune is a response to reflectory. And they both, reflectory and Claudette's Way open the side A and side B, respectively. That's an incredible tune. That's one of those tunes you wish you had written, for your wife. Except, in a certain way, there's a certain, with the benefit of hindsight, we know, of course, that maybe that marriage was not as solid as maybe ideally it would have been, but it's interesting because the mood on this tune is so hard to put into words. I mean, obviously the music speaks for itself, but there's this very kind of, it's almost like an unsettling kind of feeling. I don't know, it's hard to describe. There's a lot of things to say about the depth of feeling.
But I just
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want to say it's an incredible tune, and it's another example of really having a lot of harmonic choices, but in order to continue this mood, he makes the absolute right choice just about every moment. There's some things that happen with common tones, but the chord changes. And the unsettling part of it is that there's so much movement. There's so much movement all the time. It's harmonically unsettling, but it's extremely effective. Very effective.
Yes. Yeah, very effective.
It just points to the need, when you have this kind of melody where you do have some repeated notes all the time, just the G flat going to G minor 7 flat 5. Yeah, so that melody note D flat is the same. And in the hands of a lesser songwriter, it might be dull because they wouldn't make the right harmonic choice to create the variety you need so that it doesn't feel too melodically stuck.
Yes.
Wayne Shorter's great at this too. He's fantastic at this. But this is one of Pepper's. Wow, this is just a little masterpiece.
Yes, it is. It really is, and it is on its own. He re-recorded this a couple years later in a different context in terms of programming and albums. But the context in which this sits in the album is it's also great, and that hit me later. But like you pointed out, it has so much movement. One of the things at play here is, and it's all over the vamp in the intro, is that it is in F minor, but it's kind of asking you to wonder whether or not it's in G flat major at any given point in the tune. So the opening vamp, of course, is 1 to flat 2, just like reflectory was. It's expressed differently, but that bass part. Autumn, cut that out. Sorry. The bass part feels like a continuation of the reflectory bass part. There's reflectory, and this is. It's all in the same area. It just is, and that's amazing to me. So anyway, now, of course, it starts with a G flat chord that's very subversive. It's very interesting. One of the things I actually kind of recently learned was that you can interpret. This is another Barry concept. So the G, what we're aiming at here is this G minor 7 flat 5 that happens in bar 3. So so this G minor 7 so half diminished chords in Barry's concept. So if we have a minor 6 chord, here's B flat minor 6. If you invert it and put G on the bottom, that's G half diminished right there. So it's just B minor. It's just B minor is what G half diminished is. Of course, if you take Barry's 6th diminished concept, you can actually apply this to minor scales, not just major scales. So we can say B flat, here's a B flat minor scale, but we add a flat 6 in there just underneath the natural 6th, and we take the major 7th, and that's actually the scale that you might apply over a G half diminished. Right? So these are the notes that work. There's an A in there, there's an E flat in there, right? It's B flat minor scale. Okay, so with this concept of the related diminished, you can actually borrow notes in the chord You can borrow notes from the related diminished to change the quality of the chord. So with G half diminished, if we take the F down a step in the scale, it's now an E flat 7. Okay. If we bring it back to G half diminished, the D flat can be brought down to C, and that's now a C sus, C7 sus 4, which is, again, it works. If you just throw this in the progression, and then you go to the C7 to the F minor, it still sounds what but it's just a new opportunity for melodic and harmonic content. So okay, and then the B flat can be brought down to A, and you get an A augmented A7 sharp 5 essentially off of a G half diminished chord. I mean, this is beautiful things, and so this is Barry's concept. And then finally, the G in the G half diminished can be brought down through the 6th diminished scale, and you get G flat major 7 out of a G half diminished, G flat major 7. Right, so that's the first chord in Claudet's way. Right, so this move from G flat major, going to G half diminished, he was just borrowing this diminished note out of G half diminished to sort of suspend before we resolve into G half diminished and then go on to the C7 into the F minor. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, that's straight Barry right there. And what's neat about this is that in 1962, Pepper recorded a composition of his called Exorant on a Red Garland album called Red's Groove. These are the first chords of Exorant. Exorant is there's the G flat, right, and then it goes other places. But these are the first 4 chords of Exorant as well. Maybe Claudette maybe she quite liked that, and he was referring to it on purpose. It's kind of, you never know the layers of quoting that Pepper throws into his music. You never really can know quite where he was pulling things from. So I wanted to point that out because Exorant to me should have been one of the standards, just like Witch's Pit, as Bevan brought up earlier. It should have become one of the great jazz standards for students to play. Exorant is such an excellent tune. Okay. I wanted to say that. Let's see. Of course, this relationship between this sort of back and forth between F minor and G flat, the tune is kind of in both keys at once. And you can think of that as, a lot of common standard tunes on the bridge will go to the 4 chord. And certainly going to a minor 4 chord is an especially interesting move. And so this tune is almost a bridge tune to reflectory in that way. If you're thinking of it as being in G flat, of course, there's a relationship between diminished there. C and G flat, once again, they're in the same diminished family. And so they are related in that way too. And so it's double, it's multiple, it's so many layers on top of one another of potential meaning. I'm not going to go into a deeper analysis of this tune. Obviously, it's really very beautiful. There's a lot to say about it, but again, for the sake of time, I'm going to go forward to the next selection on the album, which is another ballad. This is Pepper's original. It's called "I Carry Your Heart," and it was based on the E.E. Cummings poem, which they read at their wedding. It's a very, very common, I've learned, very common thing to be read at weddings. Not that deep of a cut, really, but he wrote this tune based on that ballad. And so, Aaron, if you would just play, I don't think you need to, well, yeah, if you'd play the melody, that would be wonderful.
Here it comes.
Exceptional. So exceptional. So, this brings us back to the key of C, by the way. It's in the same key as Reflectory. And it starts off, it's not in the lead sheet, but they do this little intro. I think it's only two bars long, maybe 4 bars long. Up at the front, the Roland Hanna plays. And if my memory, it's going backwards through that sequence that you see, Right, so the intro, we won't talk about the intro. The A section, let's start at the top of the tune. We're in C. And then, of course, we go to E, which is like, that's about as far as you can get key center-wise. This is kind of a giant steps move. John Coltrane's giant steps moves between the 3 keys that are related by augmented triad, not diminished. By augmented triad, and those are E flat, G, and B. They're major thirds apart, not minor thirds. So Pepper's got this move, but even in Coltrane's giant steps, which is doing very rapid key movements, he's never moving straight from major chord to major chord. But again, there's a Barry Harris way of looking at this, and I really believe that Pepper had taken a lot of influence from Barry in thinking about writing harmony this way. C, so we have C, and we go to E, and we go to A flat, and then we go to B, and that's the outlier. But to move from C to E, so if we think about moving to E, right? Here's E. The diminished, which is related to it, is D sharp diminished. Sorry. D sharp diminished. Otherwise, if you look at it a different way, C diminished. Okay. Now, so C, right? So that C chord, if it was a C6 chord, it is played as a major 7th, but that's a different topic. C6 is C, E, G, and A. So C and A come from C diminished. So you can move from C diminished to C6, which creates this beautiful kind of movement. But you can go back and forth. And so that's how you can move from C to E. You don't hear Roland Hanna necessarily doing this. I haven't listened again. Maybe he does do these things. But you know, on a theoretical level, you can move these ways. And that leads you straight from C to E by taking the diminished that is related to E and moving through it to get to E. And then you can do this again to go to A flat. And then we're in A flat, right? Okay, and so anyway, that's one of the very interesting. He's not just wantonly moving in interesting intervals. There are sort of deeper structural reasons why this sounds effective to our ear, whether you know music theory or not. So A flat and B are related by minor third, not major third, and that's where the departure is, and that's where he's starting to emotionally bring us around and take us to a different place, because the front of the tune, of course, is giving you this sort of certain movement, and then and then it goes into this other thing, this series of 2/5s that you see in starting in bar 5. So A flat is related by minor third to B, which means they share a diminished. So moving from A flat to B is not that inconceivable by any stretch. And then B moves to D minor 7. Again, not that inconceivable. They're separated by minor thirds. And again, if you were to invert D7, you get F6. D minor 7, you get F6, F major 6, right? So you have just gone from A flat major to B major to essentially F major, right? And so, it's an incredible relationship that he's building between these chords. And actually, then he does it again, going from D minor 7, G7. It's this C 2/5. He goes then to F minor B flat 7. Well, F minor B flat 7, once again, related by diminished. We've not left that same diminished family for about 4 bars now, but we're just moving through that sequence. And then, of course, F minor B flat 7 goes to E minor A7, which let's see. The diminished, of course, that is related to D minor G7 and F minor B flat 7 is C sharp diminished, of course. If you had D minor, you can move to that C sharp diminished right there, back to D minor. You can do the same with F minor. So going to E minor to A7, it's not inconceivable because E minor and A7 come out of C sharp minor. Okay. And then that's a 3-6-2-5, but it's not a G7, it's a D flat 7 that goes back to C. We'll get back to that. So anyway, and plus melodically he's finding common tones, B and E are shared between C and E major, which is just gorgeous. And then he takes each one down a half step. Like he takes E down a half step, he takes B down a half step. He's really laying it out for you, and this is one of his great qualities. He's always accounting for all notes of the harmony. And he does this in his solos too. We're not talking about his solos right now, but I would. There's so much to say about the way that his mind is all encompassing on the harmony. He's really guiding the listener along. And again, B flat and E flat they work over A flat and they work over B major. That's just incredible in that way. Not the focus of what I'm talking about, but worth pointing out. So this is an interesting little Barry-ism that happens here too. So we have D minor, the melody is C. And then there's that C sharp that goes to D over the G7. Well, this is, once again, if we have G7, we're borrowing from the related diminished, which is C sharp diminished, and so that D comes down to C sharp. To create movement. This is just to create forward momentum, to create harmonic movement that isn't otherwise present, and Pepper's emphasizing it in the melody. And then he goes to the 7 of F minor 7, and does the exact same move again. E going up to F. It's borrowing from the related diminished. It's just immense. And then he does it again here over the A flat 7, the A7. If you have A7, you can borrow from the C sharp diminished with that B flat there, and you can move it down to A, which creates movement. So we have E minor 7, B flat diminished, B flat comes down, and it becomes A7. Come on, it's just amazing. I'm getting out of the octave here. Yeah, okay. That's beautiful. And then repeats that same. So, bar 5, bar 6 share the same shape and rhythm, and bar 7 and 8 share the same shape and rhythm. It's just how many things can be said about it? Sorry, that probably sounded horrible. And so one of the other things he does, again, worth pointing out, the 5 chord is a tritone sub, but it has a sharp 9, which is an incredibly deep sound, tragic almost, These are the 2 5s in this ballad, it's amazing. But anyway, this D flat with a sharp 9, you can actually create a sharp 9 over a dominant chord by putting an E triad over it. This is D flat 7. Here's an E major triad. This is that sharp 9 sound. Right. So he's emphasizing that in the melody. That's an E triad being laid over the 5 chord of that goes to C major, E major triad, so resolving the major 7th. God, good God, that's beautiful. Okay, so then the A section comes back, much like reflected. And then on the second ending, I'm not sure if that's up on the screen. It is. So then on the second ending, we come back to C again. We go through this same routine. And then instead of going to D minor, we go to G minor 7 to C7 because we're modulating to go to F minor on the bridge. Okay, so that's great because D to G and then F to B flat is a sequence. And then E to A and then G to C is the same sequence, up a step. That's beautiful. Again, it's just continuing sequences, So again, E minor, A7, G minor, C is related by minor third again. And so the G minor C takes us to F minor. Now this is really great. The bridge, here we go into the bridge. This is great. So this is F minor 6-9, which is a great sound. That's probably my favorite move in music, right there, what Pepper made on this ballad. So we're F minor. Oh, okay, so F minor 6-9. If you take this chord, this voicing of this chord, rootless voicing of this chord, F, and you just bring it down a half step to E, this is the exact same chord with just a different bass note. And again, to look at it from a Barry perspective, F minor, the related diminished is C sharp diminished. That's Barry's scale right there. Okay, so we're borrowing a diminished note in the root. We're borrowing a note from that E diminished. We're taking F and we're making it E to borrow that note. So we have, that's beautiful, right? And then we go to E flat, so that's almost like a 2-5 functioning there. I mean, the E7 winds up becoming a substituted 5 chord. It's really just a 2-5 into E flat, but what more beautiful way could it possibly be done? So again, there's more to say about how this harmonic structure unfolds. I actually want to move forward a little bit because the E flat, it's related diminished is D diminished. So the next chord after the E flat is this D7 sharp 11. What's great about it is that D7 is based on, not on D diminished, but it's based on E flat diminished. However, it's if you take an E flat diminished 7th, we borrow the E flat down to a D, we borrow the A down to a G sharp, we now have our D7 sharp 11 chord, right? So there's relationships here that take us down to C minor, F7, and then the melody does this. This is also 4 bars later, one of my other favorite moves ever in any tune ever. We go simple C minor to F7 down to B flat, and then you would expect that little cliche in B flat. That's a very common cliche. We all know this. We've heard this. But Pepper just subverts. He knows that he's used it. He uses it in his solos when it matters. But he knows that you're expecting this, and he subverts that. Instead of going to B flat at that last note, it's an A. It's an A. You see this here in the bridge. So it's just such a simple, sophisticated move. Oh God. So, really, really beautiful. And that B flat to A flat to G minor, by the way, A flat, once again, A flat 7 is C diminished, but the A was borrowed down to an A flat. So C diminished is the diminished that is related to B flat and to G minor. So that's a great little move too, to get some non-diatonic bass movement going on. And then the bass continues down to F to get us to this minor 2-5. To take us down back to back to C in the A section. Just gorgeous. Okay, and then so then we come back to the A section, and the final A section, of course, does not end the way either of the A sections did before. The end of this, so we let's bring it home here. Okay. There's that great move again. And then before we went down here to E minor, except now we're going to go. And when you hear the performance, you heard it on the recording, Pepper very victoriously it's a high palm E on the baritone, and he's just singing at this point. It's the emotional peak of the tune. I mean, it is so impactful. And when you're performing this tune, speaking from experience, you have to make sure that high E is in tune, or else you really ruin that moment. You could, with a sharp high E, it really doesn't work the same way if you're getting excited. So you have to have a lot of control over yourself, emotionally and body wise, in terms of embouchure to nail this emotional moment. And he finally breaks us out of this and gives us the relief. And that's the turnaround at the very end of I Carry Your Heart. That is the same turnaround from Reflectory, that E flat to D flat 7 to C. So he ends I Carry Your Heart as he ended Reflectory, right, in this incredible way. And so at the emotional peak of the tune, how did I voice this out? This move, that's a lot of depth there. Right, so I mean, it's just so beautiful. Let's see. Yeah, that and then geniusly, the last thing on the album is That's All. 1952, the bumper music from television. It's just like the most Pepper thing to come out of some of the greatest emotional depth, that you've ever experienced, and then go into just a total tongue-in-cheek thing. They do a real fast rendition of That's All, but anyway, it's just so it's like very funny, for him to end it with essentially a humor point seems so Pepper to me, and that's Reflectory. I mean, it's so cohesive. There's you have the first side, which is on its own has the structure of again, I said mind, heart, and body, and then you go into the side two, and it kind of is a reflection of that. It's actually Claudette's Way is more or less for the mind and kind of in heart, and I Carry Your Heart is obviously, it's in the title, for God's sake. It's the heart, and then That's All is just, it's the dance party at the end of the night, you know what I mean? It's beautiful, and so, but Claudette's Way and I Carry Your Heart are kind of like sequels to Reflectory. And it's like sequel part 1, sequel part 2. Sometimes when I start to, this is not the only example of Pepper doing this on an album, but it is one of basically the strongest, certainly. And it's hard for me programming sets for myself to separate some of these tunes. And he wrote so cohesively and programmed so cohesively that you kind of have to feel compelled to program them together on a live set too, because they're part of a larger work. They're all part of a larger work. And I don't think that he did talk about feeling strongly about having a cohesion in his albums, but he never talked about it in detail. And it's not discussed in the liner notes. The thesis of the liner notes is essentially like Pepper Adams is a stubborn man. Like that's sort of the thesis. I don't really like the liner notes on that album or on the master album either. They're both kind of, maybe Pepper, maybe he had approved of them, but they're sort of denigrating on Pepper, in like a joking way, but they don't, it seems like not quite appropriate. It seems like the most appropriate thing to do would be to kind of uplift him in the greatest way possible. But the proof is in the work. You know, the liner notes don't talk about this larger structure he has going here, but he probably had them leave it out on purpose. He probably didn't make a point of it on purpose because he was just a subtle guy. You know?
But you're going to discuss it in your book.
Yes, yeah. These are the focuses of the book. These sorts of things, bringing these things out is the whole point. So I'd also like to point out this is the first album that he recorded, solo album he recorded after leaving Thad's band. And there are no Thad Jones tunes on this album. And it's one of the first times in his solo discography that he doesn't record any Thad tunes. He makes a point to put an Ellington Strayhorn tune in. He makes a point to do that and leave Thad out. It almost feels like it's being done intentionally. And like if you look at the Encounter album, there's only 2 tunes of Pepper's, and there's not a lot of representation of his compositions. Whereas this is like just so he relied a lot on like Thad's like general message musically, but this is a great just flag waving, like I can be my own artist. My tunes can carry an album on their own. It's really great.
And it's great that it's in a quartet setting because he didn't have much of an opportunity to record in a quartet setting.
This was only his second quartet album. The first one was Ephemera, which was the album prior to this.
Yeah.
He was 42 when he did his first quartet recording. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that's my presentation on Reflectory. There you go.
Thank you. Any questions for Noah before we wrap it up with Aaron?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be darned.
Finally.
I got the setting right. That's fantastic after everybody's done. Anyway, cool. Now I know how to get this thing working. It's a new machine, so I'm not going to add anything or take up any time. I know we've been going a long time. Great to be with you, cats. Wonderful expositions of Pepper's music. I really missed the guy, too. It was a pleasure to work with him and a pleasure to hang with him. One quick question, Gary. Have we ever solved the mystery of Corville? I mean, I was hoping that his cousin might be able to tell us, because you remember Pepper supposedly lived down the street on Corville on the east side. And
after his birth.
Yeah, and when he was hanging at my pad, we were watching the Lions game and watching W.C. Fields and stuff. I lived in an upper flat on the same street on Corville on the east side. And he never mentioned anything about I used to live just down there. And so I've always wondered about that. I was hoping his cousin might be able to tell us something.
Yeah. Well, maybe he wasn't aware of it.
I'm sorry?
He wasn't aware where he was living because he split for Indiana before he was 1 year old. So he was barely there. And who remembers stuff in the first year of life? Maybe he wasn't even aware of where he lived,
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Anyway, I got people coming over in a minute, but if I do have to jump off, just thank you guys, man. Thank you for including me, and thanks for the wonderful info.
Sure.
And I'm going to hang for Aaron's presentation until the doorbell rings.
And we'll send you a link too when it's all edited, so you can hear it.
Really appreciate it. You guys are wonderful, and it's been an honor and a pleasure.
Hey, take care.
Thanks, Ken. Gary, you ready for me, or do you have anything?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so guys, my topic was Pepper's ballads, and I have a little bit more of an informal presentation than Noah's. Was very well structured. Nicely done, man. That was really, really good. No, I enjoyed it.
That's very nice. Thank you.
So I'm going to focus on 2 of Pepper's ballads. He wrote 7 ballads, as you guys know. He wrote Civilization and Its Discontents, 1973, from the Ephemera album. I Carry Your Heart, 1978, which is the one that was just discussed. In Love with Night, 1978, from Confluence. Julian, 1975, self-titled, that's the title track. Lovers of Their Time, 1980, from The Master, which is one of the ones I'm going to talk about today. Now in Our Lives, 1982, from the Adams Effect, which I've written a big band chart on that. I'm not going to discuss that one today, but I have written a big band chart on that. Gary, that was one of that big project. Remember, you were getting everything written, and that was the one tune I chose to arrange. And then Urban Dreams, 1980, which is the title track of that album, and that's the first one I'm going to start with today. And so let me first read a quote. And this is, some of you guys might be familiar with this article written by Peter Danson. This was from Coda magazine, August 1st, 1983. And Peter Danson says, when writing original compositions, and then he says especially ballads, and he puts a focus on that, Adams likes to, and then this is Pepper's actual quote, to use a strong melody which does not relate to the chords, but gives that feeling of tension across the chord, which in the end gives it a very bittersweet kind of quality. And I find this primarily achieved through Pepper using chord extensions, 9, 11, 13, and also sevenths as very, very frequent, important notes in the melody in all of his compositions, but especially in his ballads, as Peter Danson mentions. So let me pull up here. I'm going to share screen share real quick. Urban Dreams lead sheet. 1 second.
I'd like to point out that Civilization, its discontents, was only later discovered to have been written at least before 1972 or in 1972, not 3, just based off of this performance that was only released in the last couple of years.
Oh, perfect.
Which was a revelation. It was thought, of course, it was written for.
That could have been the inaugural performance of it too.
Yeah, you bought the vinyl of that, Noah, huh? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the double, it's heavy.
Yeah, I got
two
the
records
CD.
in there.
I got the CD.
Me too. I have that too.
I wrote the liner notes in 2 days. That's all I had.
They came out good, Gary.
Thanks.
So everyone can see my cursor here, right, on the screen, on the lead sheet, moving around. Cursor, I hope. Maybe not.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
okay.
we can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
So let's just listen to the head of this once, and then I'm going to say a few things about it. I'm gonna stop it there, just to get into some of the stuff that I want to say about this tune. Um, First of all, going back to this idea about emphasizing extensions of the chords, 9, 11s, 13s, and any kind of 9, natural 9, flat 9, sharp 11, or a natural 11 on a sus chord, or maybe a natural 11 on a minor chord, and of course a 13 that could be a flat 13 or whatever. So his emphasis of these as strong melody notes, I find that he also uses this to change keys very what's the word that I'm looking for? You can change keys in a very smooth way, even though it might be unexpected. So, for example, we have this 2-5, the tune's in D flat. We have this 2-5 going into D flat here in just the first 2 bars. The melody travels down to the major 7 of D flat, and then the 6th of D flat, which is a real common melodic idea that Pepper Adams uses. But he moves what was the 7th of D flat major, our tonic. It suddenly just becomes as a pivot melody note as the sharp 9 of this A7 chord. And then that allows him to go around the circle of fifths, which suddenly changes keys. He does. I'm not going to go through every instance of this. Another example of this is down here in the bridge. Here we have this common tone of an E. Okay, it's the sharp 11 here. Here it's the natural 11. It's a 2-5 in A minor, real obviously 2-5 in A minor. And this sharp 9 to the flat 9, 99% of the time that would go to the 5th of an A minor chord, right? But he needs to get to a new key here. And so rather than having it be the 5th of the chord, he allows it to be the 9th of the 2 of a 2-5 into C. And anyway, that's just a couple of examples of that. And so I got to thinking a little more and more about this. Let me stop sharing this and change PDFs, because what I ended up doing is what I labeled this thing. I mean, this is one way to analyze things, of course. What I did is I labeled this lead sheet with all of these extensions that he has. So any green circle is a major or minor 7th. Any yellow circle is a 9, flat 9, or sharp 9. Any red circle is an 11 or sharp 11. And then the orange circle is some kind of 13th. And this is my own interpretation of this. There are some that I heard just as a passing tone or something like that I didn't label, but this is when I heard something as really a major strong melody note. And you can see the overwhelming use of these chord extensions. Again, these notes that, again, in Pepper's words, gives that feeling of tension across the chord, which in the end gives it a very bittersweet kind of quality. And these are all these notes. And I don't have any strong data on this, but as compared to a lot of composers of jazz, what I would call jazz standards, this is a very high proportion of these extensions of chords as melody notes, in my opinion. And I was also kind of, we didn't listen all the way to the end of the tune, but I was kind of drawn to this chord here at the end in the coda, this D major, sharp 11, sharp 9, which could be thought of as a polychord, like a D major 7 with a C sharp triad in the right hand. And that's the exact same chord Wayne Shorter uses at the end of the bridge on Speak No Evil, by coincidence, probably. But I find it interesting that both of those guys use that same fairly unique chord sound there. So this was just, again, just a quick intervallic analysis that I did of Urban Dreams, again, thinking about the use of these chord extensions. And then let me go over to the other tune that I wanted to talk about. Or any questions before I go to my second and last ballad that I'm going to discuss?
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So then the next tune is Lovers of Their Time. Let me pull that up quickly. Okay. So here we got this. It's a tune in B flat major. I don't have to go through all of the analysis with you guys, but this is a very 2/5 heavy original composition. You know, one chord sort of goes down chromatically, then by whole step with some great passing chords, 2/5 to the 4, 2/5 to the major 3, you know, and this kind of emphasis of the 2/5 to the a major chord on the minor 3 is very reminiscent of Ellington or Strayhorn harmonic sensibilities, in my opinion. And again, he uses a lot of these chord extensions on here. Let's listen to the melody of this one time. I'm going to stop it there right before his solo. I'm going to play the solo momentarily. But this one has, similarly to the previous tune I just discussed, the same idea of notes that you expect to be in one chord found in yet another chord to help it quickly change keys by way of a 2/5. So for example, right here in bar 3, the melody is up on the 7th of the 4 chord here, the E flat major. Sort of arpeggiates up right back to that same D, but then this is a different 7th of a new 2 chord. It allows us to change keys. Okay, we're in D major now. You'd expect to hear a C sharp if the D major carried into this measure, which it doesn't, but the C sharp's inharmonically shown as a D flat. It's a 7th suddenly of a 2 chord of a new key. Anyway, this idea continues on and on throughout all of his compositions. In my opinion, I find that quite frequently. Let me show you real quick. I labeled also that lead sheet, and you can see again the number of times that he is putting a lot of emphasis on these 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13s in the melody. And so with that in mind, I wanted to just go ahead and also play for you guys the transcription of his Barry solo, just to hear it. Oh, see you, Ken. Thanks, man. Let me just play this real quick, and this is going to kind of wrap up what I wanted to talk about. So here we are right at the end of his melody, and I'll let it play. It's such a great solo, and it's also one of the. He was not a huge altissimo practitioner like Ronnie Kuber was, or maybe Nick Brignola or somebody like that. But this is an example of him getting a couple of altissimo A's in there on this solo as well, which is pretty cool. So, you know, guys, not an exhaustive discussion of his ballads, but it's a little take on some of the things that I have to think about it of out of this Peter Danson article. And again, it's these again, it's a strong melody that doesn't relate to the chords, but gives a feeling of tension across the chord, which in the end gives it a very bittersweet kind of quality. And I like this word bittersweet, and I think it's from the use of the extreme use of chord extensions, sevenths, ninths, 11ths, 13ths in his melodic composition. So there you have it.
Great job. Do I have that transcription? Did you send that to me? Did we post it on pepperadams.com?
It's there.
It should be there. Yeah.
I used to read that transcription in high school.
Oh, did you really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was a
So that dates me and you.
Oh, I know. I'm getting up there. Yeah.
Oh, great. So we have done what? 3 hours? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, over 3 hours. I appreciate Noah, you hanging with us, and Aaron doing all this work, and Bevan, I think, still there, possibly. Ron's floating around there. Any final words before we wrap it up?
I
Like to ask
appreciate
Ron.
I appreciate all y'all being here, man, and discussing this amazing genius.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we normally do this around Pepper's birthday, but Aaron had a little snag with the schedule, so it pushed past the election. But it's good that we got this all in. And I want to thank everybody for participating.